All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Raising the Bar. And as you know, we're bringing on these people that are really doing some great work in, exposing some of the corruption that's going on at the moment and really being on the front line. And Mark Byford is someone who is doing that. How are you doing, sir?
John, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here.
No, absolutely pleasure to have you on,
yeah.
mate.
Sorry?
Absolute pleasure to have you on, and with your bowler hat as well.
Oh, I know, absolutely. Do you know, this was my great grandfather's.
Right.
So it's something what didn't ever come out of the box, only to go to like a country show.
Right.
And when it got handed down through the family, it's always been kept with great, privacy, and no one was allowed to touch it. And then I got it.
Oh, okay, you got it.
And it literally goes everywhere with me.
Oh, does it? Is it almost like the Pulp Fiction with the watch, where it gets handed down? He does everything to protect it.
Absolutely.
But Mark, obviously, you've got a very important story to share, very important information, because it's not just the fact that you're a farmer and you're working on that kind of level of awareness. There's a deeper level to this. There's a deeper level of concentration of power that's going on as well. That's, I guess, it's getting its tentacles out everywhere in the world, and we're just seeing it sort of emerging in different countries, aren't we? And you're on the front lines of this. Where would you like to start with this? How can we, preface this for the audience? Let them know what's going on, and what's the cause of this, and then at the end we'll go into what can we do about it.
Sure. Okay, let's backtrack, because lots of people like to ask me the question of, well, what qualifies you to talk about this? So I guess if I start right back to the beginning, I'm a sixth generation farmer. So the family's been in farming now for 6 generations, directly or indirectly. My grandfather ran a mechanical engineering side to the farming community. So they ran the big steam engines. So they did contract thrashing machines and ploughing and all sorts. So they were on and off hundreds of different farms all over East Anglia. So for me, 6th generation, I've got a fair understanding of what should happen throughout the seasons on a farm. So my uncle still runs a family farm. And for me, at 5 years old, I was chucked on the back of a cow. The cow was given a spank on the backside, and Grandad had said to me, listen, what I need you to do is take the cows down to the big field where we have the picnics. The gate's open. What you do is go through the gate with the cow, and the cows know what they're doing. Oh, how hard can it be, at 5 years old? So he spanked the cow's backside. The cow took off down the road with me on it. So a mile down the road, the cow I'm on, which is Daisy, the matriarch cow, walks in right round the field, comes back to the gate. By then, the whole 500 cows have got into the field. She shuts the gate. I jump over the gate and walk off to school and thought no more of it. Now, can you imagine now, with health and safety, giving a 5-year-old the experience of that alone,
Gosh, yeah.
So for me then, at 11 years old, I told my dad I wanted pocket money, and he said, well, I'll double what you earn. So, okay, I can get that. So I went and got a job on a pig farm, working on a big pig farm. And that was an industrial pig farm where there was thousands of pigs, and they were all indoors. So there was no pretty fields for them to graze in or anything else. This was real harsh farming. It was a real dedicated lesson to me. 16, went off to agricultural college and got one of those famous bits of paper, one of those really important bits, which is never any use to you for the rest of your life, but you feel like you've achieved something because
makes your mum
and
proud.
dad are really pleased. Yeah. Then I was fortunate enough that a local farmer gave me a little bit of ground to start growing on. I built a sort of small market garden and got into the wholesale side of fruit and veg. And so I've always been right the way through my life at some way or another in the wholesale fruit and veg trade, the retail fruit and veg trade, or on the farm. So I've got quite a broad spectrum. And even now I work full-time in a fruit and veg wholesale company, and I've still got my area on the family farm, which I farm, and then obviously work with inside the family farm as well. What I've seen is catastrophic for the food supply chain, and I cannot emphasize that enough, of what is coming down the line. So if I give you the example of where we are at the moment, let's say in the 70s, we had this massive funnel with a pipe down it. And it was heaped up with grain mountains and milk lakes and everything else. We had this abundance of food in Europe that was just they were paying farmers to produce food to keep the food prices down. So when you look at the things called what we would have called then, agricultural subsidies, those subsidies were in place to force the price of food down, so the consumer, when they went to the supermarket or the local shop, ended up with food at cheap prices. Okay, so those subsidies, the farmers didn't necessarily want to take the subsidies, but it was the only way they could produce the food so cheaply. So that was the whole point. The government wanted that food cheap to keep the economy moving in the right direction. That has changed. And what I've seen now over the course of the last few years is for those who do or don't know about the WEF, the World Economic Forum, a group of unelected billionaires that have decided that basically we don't need food produced in the manner that it has been for millions of years. So their decision, this is not my opinion, this is on their website. They have decided that things like synthetic foods, for instance, made from petrochemicals and things, can be produced in a factory easily. We can grow vegetables in water. Well, we can, but they don't have any nutritional value. So if I give you an example on that, we feed, as a sustainability food, we feed waste carrots to our animals. So they will hold them at a certain weight, but they won't give them any goodness to be able to develop. So when they get to a certain weight, we can hold them on that before they go off to market. And that doesn't allow them to put any, that doesn't give them any protein. So they don't put any fat on, they don't get any more nutrition inside the body. It just holds them at that stability point. And that's where we are if we go down the road of hydroponic fruit and veg, that it will sustain you at the level you're at. But I eat food because I want to be strong. I want to develop my body. I want to, want that nutrition inside me to be able to move myself forward on a daily basis. And that's what's been eroded in the food industry. And we see this more and more and more on the commercial farms, for instance, the nutritional value of the food, because the soil has been raped of absolutely every piece of goodness out of it. I'm fortunate, family farm. My uncle understands what's going on. He's very awake. He is also looking very differently at how they've farmed for the past 50 years. And he's now looking at things going, hell, we really need to change. So those changes have got to come. The problem of those changes coming, John, is that people are not being allowed to put those changes in place because Defra and the Environment Agency, for instance, typical governmental departments, far too much overreach, are stopping them achieving those things, what they want to do on the farm. Like, if we want to put a pond in, for instance, there's a steward's inquiry on why we might want extra water on the farm. Well, it's just nice for nature. It's, it's somewhere we can draw water from in the summer should we need to. Well, no, you can't do that. So there's a lot going on. I mean, I'll cut across slightly, but I don't know if you've seen what's going on in Oregon at the moment in the US. I don't know if you followed this story.
No, go on.
Okay, so the government has decided in Oregon that all small farmers will cease trading.
Well, I know Bill was trying to buy up loads of farmland, wasn't he? But
he's bought millions of acres. Yeah. But what they're doing is they've made it illegal for small farmers to now produce food. They've shut down all the farmers markets, all the CSA schemes, which are the community supported agricultural schemes, where they deliver boxes to people's houses. The small farms are not allowed to take any water out of the reservoirs, out of the wells or anything else, completely shutting them down with cease and dismiss orders from the government to say you can no longer trade. And all the big farmers, all the big commercial farms that are owned by the banks are just swallowing the land up.
What's the reason they're giving, though? Well, what are they saying? What's their reason? Well,
their reason is that obviously small farmers are producing food that is dangerous to humans. No. Because so this is factual. This has come out of the fact that they're growing, and the Amish community have had this as well, that they used to grow and butcher their own food, and they got pulled up on it last year, and they started arresting a load of the Amish people for producing food that was outside the approval of the government because it didn't reach the bad standards the government would expect people to want.
It's all inverted, isn't it? The food's too good, it's too nutritious for them.
Too nutritious,
They can't have it.
that.
They can't have it. I'm sure we'll probably connect the dots a little bit later in how, you know, they kind of want us to have this low nutritional food anyway, because it then feeds into the pharmaceutical industry, and then it creates patients, doesn't it? It creates customers in the pharmaceutical. I call it the pharma industrial complex. It's all interconnected, and so when you connect all of it together, you see how it works. You know, it's all like a network. Can I just ask, so what's the excuse they're giving in the UK for, you know, meddling with the soil and everything else? And who are the government bodies? Like, who exactly is it? The same as in America or not?
Well, in the UK, certainly in Britain, if I talk from our side, we have Defra. Defra is the government policy, government department that looks after anything to do with rural affairs. So from farming, fisheries, agriculture of any description comes within that. So what Defra has done is they've come up with these absolutely fantastic schemes that are, well, there's no other way to put it, John. They're there to destroy what's going on in the farming community without any doubt at all. So if I'll give you a few examples. So if a farmer's coming up to retirement age and the children don't want to take the farm on, for instance, that farmer will now be paid in between £100,000 and £120,000 as a retirement fund in cash into their bank the day they sign the paperwork. On top of that, they then get to sell the farm. So a land agent steps in and buys the farm or sells the farm on their behalf, and that can only go to a certain amount of people. So that tends to go to someone who's going to pay over the top for it, and that would be somebody from the banking community or the likes of Bill Gates, someone like that. It's not going out to, you know, friends down the road that might want to get into farming. So these never come on the market as physically coming onto the market for everyday people to buy. These are getting swallowed up and then just put down to the second part of this, which is the subsidy side. So we have a thing called the ELMS policy, which is just recently launched by Defra in the UK. And that enables farmers to claim up to £250 an acre to grow pretty flowers. So now, just to put this in perspective, and I'm going to convert in between acres and hectares here, so I apologise for that, because I don't know the hectare figure against the acreage figure. But I had a phone message the other day. I did the show with Richard Bobes, and after watching it, one of my friends who's a potato farmer messaged me, and he said, just so you know the figures and the actual figures, he said, Mark, we grow potatoes and onions. He said, which we grow at £780 profit per hectare. Okay. But they can get more money, 2.5 times the profit for growing flowers. And they do not have to turn a plough, pay any staff, anything. They just drill it and leave it for 5 years. And for 5 years, the government pays them in the bank every year without fail. Right? So why would a farmer with the liability of staff and tractors, now bear in mind that I was speaking to a friend the other day, he's just bought a new combine, and that was 1.2 million. Or he can grow pretty flowers for the government and not have to spend 1 pence. So you can understand why a lot of these farmers are going, well, bugger it, let's grow flowers, you know. The problem is, where does the food come from? If you know, we haven't yet spoken about, but, you know, within the WEF, there is this thing called the 2030 Agenda, which is where they have set down what they think we would like by the year 2030. And if you read into the agenda, I got shown the agenda when I was 21. I'm now 56. Oh, right. I laughed at it and I was like, this is just mad. It doesn't make any sense, because there's no way they'll stop the food supply, because farmers will want to farm. But when you pay a farmer 3 times what it is to grow food, you can understand why they wouldn't want to farm. So it then brings all these things into place. So you kind of see this massive steamroller, you know, is rolling down the road, and it's gradually getting towards you, and you can't get out of the way of it, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's where I think we are at the moment. So there's lots of these initiatives in place for farmers to not produce food or can simply get out of farming.
Because weren't they last year? Weren't they offering farmers like 100 grand just to to pack up and leave?
Yeah, well, that's now up to 120 because not enough people took them up on it.
So was there a bit of resistance to that, where like farmers got together and said, "Screw them, we see the game plan here, we're not doing it." Yeah,
a little bit. I mean,
yeah.
Those who were up for retirement, were thinking, bear in mind, John, that we've got 105,000 farms in the UK.
Yeah.
In the last 3 months, 2,000 of those have taken the get out of farm payment. Right, so that gives you an idea. So almost 2% of all farms have been lost in the last 3 months. And they just keep upping the amount in accordance to get more people to come out of it. And then the pressure what's been put on as well. Bear in mind that most farmers, if you take my uncle, for instance, there's him. And he has a couple of people what kind of drift in and out to help with things. The legislation now and the bureaucracy what's involved in running the farm is just surreal. So, for us to be able to grow a crop, we have to tell Defra what we're going to grow. We have to get their approval to grow it. I mean, I had a second small farm, which has been quite comical because we got into rows with the planning committee and they asked me to send a list of everything I was going to grow on the farm. So I said, a complete list. Absolutely, we've got to have a complete list. So I phoned the seed company who produces all my seed, got the whole calendar on a spreadsheet and sent it to the council and said, this is what we're going to grow. You kind of go, you can just imagine how many people sat around the table to have the conversation of, of how long that was all going to take to grow and, what was going to happen. They probably had a dozen people work on that for a week. So you have to look at all of these things and break it down into, really what's next, because the farmers are being pushed to the point they mentally can't afford to stay in it.
Yeah.
Financially, they cannot afford to stay in it because, if you grow wheat or barley, let's say, for instance, and you earn £50 an acre, if someone says to you, well, it's £250 an acre to grow flowers, where's the logic in farming? But coming back to what I was saying about the 2030 agenda, and it's important to cover this because people, if they haven't yet looked into the 2030 agenda, don't take my word on this. This is all off their website. So
I'll flash it up. Flash it up. Yeah.
Whatever anybody wants to question on this from my side, go away and do your own research. Please, any member of the public, go and do the research. What there is on this is within the 2030 agenda, the big thing in that what stuck out to me was by 2030 to 2050, we cease to import any food from overseas. The way they've worded that is not to cease the food. They've said that we'll cut down on the amount of boats traveling to the country or the amount of aeroplanes coming into the country, or the amount of lorries coming into the country, for instance, from overseas. Well, that's how we get the food here. Yeah. So people are saying, well, we definitely need less aeroplanes in the sky. There's these pretty trails in the sky everywhere. Yeah, we'll cover that perhaps.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a minute.
So if we have less planes, we have less ships, and we have less vehicles coming into the UK, none of them any longer carrying food. Where's the food come from? Now, we'll just go back on that point, because a year ago, it was thought that the figure was 60% of all food that we ate in the UK was produced in the UK. That's now 49% a year later. Now, bear this in mind, John, that this year we're seeing a massive amount of farmland coming out of farming because farmers are taking the get out payments. We're seeing huge amounts of farmland, and I mean huge amounts, go down to solar farms. Thousands upon thousands of agricultural acres going down to farmland without the building going on across the country, without, all these things that are swallowing up thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres that are not going to be there next year, the year after, the year after, the year after. So the pretty flower schemes within the ELMS policy is a 5-year scheme. You will be fined or lose your farm if you go back on that scheme.
What, back to food, you mean? Back to
So if you was the farmer, you've taken it, and there's suddenly a massive problem. We need food. You can't produce any.
What, they can't even allow you in a state of emergency if the country needed food to deal with it?
Not without legislation change. No.
Unbelievable.
It is, and that's exactly the point, isn't it? You know,
how is that not waking people up? Like, how are people not just?
I don't think people really realise. That's, I think, is the problem. And
well, people don't really react until there's enough people also panicking that they think, oh, I should probably panic as well. There must be an issue here. A lot of this stuff is if it's not spoken about by the man on TV in the suit and tie, then people won't actually react, because that's the point at which they kind of, okay, something's going on now. You know, it's hypnosis, really, isn't it? It's mass formation psychosis.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
When you look at lots of these things and things that seem so small, you know, that you might think, well, it's not really a problem, you know, and then you bolt 3 or 4 of those together and they become a little problem, and 10 of those together, they become a massive problem. And that's what we've seen, this slow churn of all these things coming together. I mean, there was a classic example with a farmer I know. There was a flood in the middle of the village.
Yeah.
And the flood every year blocks the middle of the village off. So the farmer got his digger out and cleaned the ditch out. He was given the approval by the local, you know, the parish council, and they all thanked him and patted him on the back until he got a fine for £1,000 from the Environment Agency for clearing a ditch without consent. And that's what you're up against.
So they're upping all the bureaucracy and hitting you with all these, like, you know, random kind of absurd fines for things, and threatening you with fines, and so everyone's just panicking, and then they're offering you the path of least resistance, which is, you know, create these flower fields, right?
What you would do is just create these flower fields, or get out of farming, because that's going to be much easier.
Or get out. But what about the farmers that are left and they are producing food? Are they not more sought after? Are they not getting more business?
Now there's an interesting question. So one of the schemes I looked at, you can either go in from year 1 at 100%, and year 2, 80%, 60%, 20%. So you come down from the sliding scale.
What do you mean? Why
so you put all of your land in year 1.
Yeah.
So bear in mind that this has been sold to the farmers on the ground that this will give your ground, putting pretty flowers down, will give the ground a chance to breathe. It will give it a chance to naturally, the nitrogen to grow into the ground again, so we don't need to use so much fertilizer. Okay, so that's how it's been sold to the general public. If we rest the land, which is a great thing to do, we'll rest the land. We won't do anything. You can't graze any animals on it. We'll just grow this lovely grass and clover and flowers, and fields will look beautiful. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then you don't have to worry about nothing. As a farmer, you're just going to let the soil naturally build itself back up again. So in year 1, you can put 100% of your land in. Year 2, you reduce that to 80%. Year 3, 60%, 40%, 20%, until you're back into farming in 5 years. Should legislation not change, and they tell you that you can't put it back into agricultural land, okay? Because once you're in the scheme, however they change the legislation, it's down to them.
You're locked in.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're locked in. However, most of the schemes which are being offered by land agents and by Defra, which are being pushed the other way around. So you put in 20% year 1, 40% year 2, 60% year 3, so that you increase the amount of land going in, which obviously means that over the course of the forthcoming years, there's less and less and less and less land available. Now, what I will say is, after a conversation I had with someone who works on a huge farm, and I'm talking one of the big land estates, 10,000 acres, that they've been suggested to them that they might put theirs in year 1 and come out over the course of 5 years, because when most people get to year 5, theirs will all be in. So there won't be any food. But the big landowners are putting theirs in the other way round. So they'll have no food when everyone else has got it, and they'll start producing more and more and more food,
and they'll get less and less and less for the
So they'll have less and less and less land in the system, more for agricultural use, and what they grow will be worth a fortune because nobody else will be producing anything.
And that's the big organizations doing that. Yeah. The monopolists.
It's monopolists, yeah. So the elite get richer,
yeah,
while the normal farmers are then stuck in this treadmill that they can't get out of, even if they want to.
Can I just get that? So can I summarize that? So basically, if you were a farmer that wanted to continue creating food produce, after going through all the jumping through hoops and everything else that you're made to go through, you're saying that you're allowed to start off with 100% of. Can you summarize? Can you sort of clarify that for me?
Yeah, sure. So so smaller farmers,
yeah,
they start off on year one with 20% of their land in.
What do you mean their land in? What does that mean?
Okay, so they're going to put 20. So they've got 100 acres.
Yeah,
they're going to put 20 acres in year one into a pretty flower scheme.
Are they going to partition it off? So 20% is going to go in for flowers, right? So they're allowed to keep 80% for just food produce.
Yes. Year two,
yeah,
you put 40% of your land in.
What, for produce? Yeah.
For growing flowers and 60% for produce.
40 for flowers, 60 for food produce. Yeah.
Year three, 60% flowers, 40% food.
Right.
Year four, 80% for flowers, 20% for food. And by the time you get to year five, you don't produce anything at all.
But I mean, are they agreeing to that or not? Or are they forced to do that?
Well, why wouldn't you want to when you're going to be paid 4 to 5 times the amount of money that you get for growing food?
Yeah, no, I see that. But what about the farmers that are digging their heels in and saying, I'm not doing that. I want to stick doing food produce. Are they not sought after? Are people, because if there's less farms around.
That's what's going to happen. The problem is, John, that most of the farmers I talk to are so asleep it's untrue. And I hate to say that, but
really,
probably the farmers I talk to, 90%, if you mention net zero, they just look at you like, if I challenge the fact of net zero, everyone, will say, call me out on it and say, where do you get these facts from? Well,
they speak about it openly. It's in their own documents. That's the thing.
Well, what I find interesting on this is I did a seminar the other night, 130 people in the room, and I asked the questions in the room. Now, it was quite an awake audience, I have to say. And I asked the question of what is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? And the whole room said 0.04%.
Yeah.
Okay, the whole room without fail. And I said, well, that can't be right because you all agree on it. So we can't have that to start with, because, and that's a government statistic. Yeah. Okay. But if I say to farmers, or not just farmers, I've challenged councillors on it, and I say, what do you think the percentage is? Because if people who are not awake, all they know is it's too high. That's the end of it. It's just, we've got to get it down. Okay, so what is it? Well, they say, I don't know, it might be 10%, 20%. Okay, well, it isn't. It's 0.04%. That's fact. That's on the government's, all their scientists say that's what it is. Now, let's just challenge something here. I'm not an intelligent person. I don't claim to be. But what I do know is I didn't attend school and achieve very much, but I did like science. And the one thing that I remember learning was about how through photosynthesis we can turn energy into growth for a plant and that we can eat. The other thing I remember was that if we've got more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere,
more
plants grow bigger.
Exactly.
Okay, so for me on my farm, I grow tomatoes, heritage tomatoes, and we have polytunnels. And we gas the polytunnels with carbon dioxide to make the plants grow better and have more fruit and more leaves. And they do better in a higher carbon dioxide environment. So, and I still work in there with all that gas. I don't die. Right? You don't die. It's as simple as that. Now, don't get me wrong. If it gets too much, you can get a bit lightheaded enough to come out. But 20% you can work in that as an environment. Okay? So, if we're going to aim to get to net zero, what are the plants going to live on?
Exactly.
Bear in mind that I'm going to talk in real simple terms here. So I'm a tree. You're a human being, John. Fair? Okay. I breathe in oxygen and I breathe in carbon dioxide as the tree and I expel oxygen. You take in the oxygen, you breathe out the carbon dioxide. We both live in harmony as a result of that. if we bring the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere down to zero, what they're talking about, they want to get this net zero is all about getting the carbon dioxide down to nothing. When we get to 0.2%, vegetation stops growing. End of. When the vegetation stops growing, we die. That's quite simple. That's not me scaremongering.
The argument is that they're trying to get the man-made carbon dioxide emissions down, aren't they? Because you can't stop the water vapor, can you? Which is like the largest form of
90% of the vapor of the world.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing is, we know it's a SCAM. I can't say it on YouTube because it'll get flagged.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious what's going on. They're using that as an excuse, as a boogeyman, to legitimize all these power plays all over the world. Frightening us, scaring us. I've had conversations about the forest fires. Forest fires are actually going down in the last 100 years, not up. All these types of things are all. It's a manipulation of data with the hockey stick. They've actually stitched that on. That's actually not what the real temperatures look like.
Yeah.
And as you say, carbon dioxide, it is a plant food. It's like the most important thing.
It's the food of life. It's as simple as that.
It's all upside down and inside out. But it's that thing about if you tell the lie enough, people will start believing.
Absolutely. And bear in mind that this lie has been going on for 50 years. I remember when I was a kid that, we were told all the polar bears are going to die and, there's no ice for the polar bears. Now they're having to cull the polar bears because there's so bloody many of them.
Yeah, exactly. But they have the polar bear hanging onto the little ice block, don't they, to scare people.
But I watched an interesting video about that, what someone sent me, and they were saying that polar bears can swim for hundreds of miles. So what they used to do was, every time they would rest, they'd just find the nearest thing to latch onto. If that was an iceberg, then they'd just take a rest. So get the picture of them hanging onto this iceberg. They're not hanging onto it. He stopped for a 5-minute break and he swims for another 50 miles.
No, I know. It's funny how those photos of the polar bears hanging onto the ice blocks, they win like the prizes, the annual competitions, don't they? They're trying to embed it into the collective consciousness, this idea of we're doing that to the planet. It's absolutely scandalous. I was going to say, how are they? Let's say you went screw you to, is it Defra? What's it called? I mean, that's a kind of an ironic name, isn't it?
Defra. Yeah, Defra.
How are they coming in and how would they affect the soil? Let's say you're a farmer and you're saying screw you, I'm doing my own thing here. How can they still come in and tamper with your land and with the soil?
Okay, let's go back to the conversation which I said. Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed, and this is only my personal opinion, over the past 10 years, let's say, for instance, the weather manipulation, and certainly through what I believe Chem Trials, if you look at both of those and how they've escalated in the last 10 years. So I went to visit a carrot farm today where I buy my carrots from, and for the wholesale division, right? And it's a big farm, 1,000 acres plus, and they grow just carrots, right? So the main factory, I believe, is owned by Sainsbury's, but the farmer owns the land. But they all go through the processing plant, and they're all sent off to the Sainsbury's stores across the country. And there's a few people like myself who are going there to buy wholesale. So we would normally have a window of 4 to 6 weeks in the year where there is no carrots. Okay. And normally in that time, we would have, let's say, French or Portuguese carrots coming into the UK by the lorry load, and they would be sent out through the wholesale division, or they'd be sent into the supermarkets direct, whatever that might be. So I've gone in today to be told that there will not be any more carrots until probably September. So they've got two issues. One, the carrots that are in the ground, they can physically not lift because the ground's too wet to get the equipment onto. So they can't get out what's there, and they've not drilled anything because it's too wet. Okay. I'll go on so that's the carrot farm. Now, if we talk about bulky produce here, if you're looking to feed a nation, if we talk about the basic bulks, okay, the friend what I said about the potatoes and the onions, he said to me the other day, this time last year, they had 100% of their seeds set by February. At this point, we're nearly into April. they've set 16% of their seed. So come the end of this year, there will not be any potatoes available. So we know there's no carrots. We now there's no potatoes. They can't set the onions again because it's too wet. But take our farm, the family farm. We planted some fields with wheat. It rotted off in the ground because it was just so wet. So, okay, we'll re-drill it with spring barley. We still can't get on the ground because the ground's too wet. So the spring barley's now not going to go in. The only option that then leaves us is we could possibly plant something like beans. But everyone's in the same position, so there isn't enough seed to go round.
This is interesting because I thought when you mentioned chemtrails, I thought you were going to talk about like the chemicals affecting the soil, but you're talking more about the wetness of the ground.
Okay, I'm gonna cover the other side as well.
Yeah. So so I didn't realize that has there been an increase in water levels on the soil then?
It's horrendous. So just to give you an idea, our rainfall this year across East Anglia is 3 times what it would normally be.
Is that right? Because February was a great month. It was very sunny the whole way through.
What part of the country are you in?
London. It was one of the best. It was one of the best Februarys you've ever. I thought it was the best February you've ever had.
It rained in Suffolk nearly every day. So
fair enough.
So we are completely, and the most of the land around here is very heavy clay.
Right.
So
okay.
you know, and the area what I farm, I did something really stupid this year. I got given lorry loads of koi, which is the husk from coconut shells. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant for growing in. Absolutely fantastic. And I covered the ground, my area, in about 6 inches deep on top of the clay, thinking, well, that's brilliant. I'll get it all on. Then I've just got to cultivate it in it. It'll make the soil lovely and soft. What actually happened was the water sat on top of the clay. The coir held the water so it couldn't dry, and we just ended up with all this coir floating about on top of this.
Oh, right.
So it's so wet we can't do anything with it.
So is this? So you think that this is a deliberate weather manipulation? They must have sort of heart-based technology or something.
I cannot believe that. And I know people. I spoke to a climate scientist the other day who's very awake, I will say, and he said to me, "There's no way he can't buy into that side of it." Which I'm fine, don't.
Yeah.
But he'll talk about the chemtrails and about that side of it, but won't buy into the fact that there could be weather manipulation in this. But when you look at how much water has fallen locally, now bear in mind that East Anglia has had real high rainfall. There's fields everywhere just washed out. Okay. East Anglia is the grain centre for the whole of the UK.
Right.
So most of the grain which is grown in this country is grown in East Anglia. The second crop we have is sugar beet in massive amounts. Sugar beet obviously produces silver spoon sugar. There is thousands of acres still sitting now. The sugar beet factory is closed because they have a certain campaign time. The sugar beet factory is closed in Bury St Edmunds now. And there's still thousands of acres of sugar beet to be lifted. So if they can get it up, they've got to then take it, best part of 70 miles to the nearest next factory, what is still open. That's adding all that expense on to the cost of a bag of sugar. And the farmers still can't get them out of the ground. So there isn't a lot of chance at the moment of them being lifted.
Okay, right. Just all because of the wetness on the ground. So do you think that's from cloud seeding, or what do you think that's from?
I do, yes. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So if we come back to the chemtrail side.
Yeah, okay.
So what I have seen of the over the past 4 years, especially since the lockdown happened, growing changed completely. So things where normally we could just chuck seed in and not have to worry about it germinating. Nature would just take its course, and we would never have to worry about was it going to seed, wasn't it going to, was it going to shoot or not going to shoot. We didn't have to worry about the susceptiveness to bacteria on the ground so much. Now we're up against everything, and I believe that's down to the amount of metal that's now in the ground, that the ground cannot naturally deal with it. If it stopped and the ground had a chance to, if if that's constantly laying on the ground from chemtrails, which is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
These planes are flying over. I mean, the other day I took a picture. I just couldn't believe it. It was literally looked like a checkerboard, the sky above where I was.
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? People think they're normal, charter planes. You're like, come on.
Just aeroplanes. It's just condensation. What planet are you on? I don't know if you've ever watched that. They made a film a couple of years ago called Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
And that is the classic example of that. No, you don't need to worry about that. That's not really there. They're clouds. Yeah, they might look like clouds in a day's time, but at the minute they look distinctly like chemtrails.
I mean, it's literally like a lattice grid formation over the sky. It's just like, come on, think about it, guys. Come on.
I said to my mum yesterday. I said, I was talking about chemtrails, and my mum's 77, and she always says to me, "Oh, darling, you do make me laugh with some of the things you come out with." She's had several of them, despite me telling her, what would happen. However, and this is a slightly different subject, but if you don't mind, I got home yesterday and my mum says to me, "Have you seen about that?" I said, "Seen about what, Mum?" She said, "That boat hitting that bridge." I said, "Oh, I did. I heard about it." She said to me, "If you slow that film footage down, there's 2, if not 3 explosions on that bridge before that boat hits it." I said, "Sorry, this is my mum." Yeah. You look at it and slow the footage down because it's at night before the boat impacts.
Yeah.
You see 3 small explosions on the bottom of the bridge before the bridge collapses. Then the boat hits it.
Yeah, and that also, you're going to say that connects into food shortages as well, right?
Now bear in mind I think that's the biggest port in America.
Yeah.
One of the biggest shipping lanes they have is now completely blocked off with no access, with a bridge across it. So it's a bit like the train crash they had the other year where all the chemicals were released into the water system. It's just all this, and this is what I say about the erosion of food production. We didn't see it here as much as they did in America, but in America last year and the year before, they certainly had lots of suspicious explosions, if that's the right word, explosions and fires in food production factories that shut down food production. Especially in a lot of the smaller ones, what wouldn't agree to sell out to some of the bigger conglomerates. I mean, just what's the chances of that happening? I don't know.
Just you have to be a coincidence theorist, I call it. What do you think those chemicals are that you said the heavy metals? What kind of metals do you think they are?
Aluminium, definitely.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know about the others. What I do know about the aluminium side is, obviously, if you've got a heavy metal that's magnetic, theoretically, you could take it out of the land. If you've got a big enough magnet and you could, get that kind of level of power across the land, you could, on a small enough area or big enough area, if you had the equipment to do it, take that out of the top. But this stuff is so small and so tiny, this gets washed through the soil levels with the rain what comes down. So that takes that away. Plus, obviously, aluminium is not magnetic. So it's important, the use of the aluminium, also because aluminium is really difficult. If it gets into the food supply chain and you take it into your body will consume it, and it's difficult to get it out of your body. Where a lot of the heavy metals you can certainly remove if you know how to do it through antitoxin, meds and drinks, and by detoxing generally, you can remove a lot of that from your body. Aluminium's really, really difficult to remove from the body. So it's really important from their side, if you want to make people sick, coming back to your first point.
There we go.
If and this is where we say about connecting the dots.
Yeah.
If you look at that, that's hampering. Also, every time there's all these beautiful grey clouds in the sky, there's no sunshine. So you and I, as human beings, rely on a heavy amount of vitamin D, and we also need sunshine to keep our moral state of mind. And this is, in my belief, is about breaking the human psyche and pulling to bits people. Take the lockdown as a classic example. If you talk about 2020, beautiful sunshine for months on end, not a plane to be seen, no chemtrails in the sky. Everyone was happy to be at home. Everyone was like, "Oh, this lockdown's a doddle." You wait till the next one comes. You wait till the next one
There's going to be
comes.
another one. Yeah, I spoke about this with John O'Looney. I don't know if you know about him, but funeral
I
director.
do.
And he's had information given to him about all these UN soldiers coming in and being put up in hotels and military bases, and they're going to enforce the next lockdown, which is coming.
I have heard this. It's quite a lot apparently coming in from Africa.
Yeah. I mean, from places where they have no patriotism to us.
And that's exactly right. And that's an important point, because everyone would say the police would get pushed so far, but they would always back the public eventually, because if there is no food, the police or the ambulance or the fire brigade would say, sod this, we need to work with the public here, we need food.
Yeah.
So we've got to allow that farmer to go out and grow food, we've got to allow that food delivery to come through, because they're British. Yeah. They're here. Their families are here. Yeah. If you suddenly import hundreds of thousands of UN soldiers that are put up until the time is correctly needed, which is why they're not being encouraged to work, why they're being encouraged to go onto these boats and things where they are just training camps.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, anyone, don't take my word for this. Look into it. And John, as I'm sure you're aware, any of this information, you don't have to dig very deep to find it.
It's hidden in plain sight, always.
Always. They have to tell you what's happening. Yeah. And if you look on either the WHO, the WEF, NATO, the UN, it's all there. They're all the same organisation. Call it what you want, but pay it what it's worth. They are all the same organisation, the same people controlling them, the same money funding them, and all of that comes down to just a very few people. We could name most of those on one hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, it's sad, isn't it, really? Yeah, how they're able to do it. I mean, it's just, in a way, it's sort of, you have to say fair play. It's fiendish, but like they're pulling it off almost, aren't they?
It's comical. But there is the other side to this, and obviously one of the things, if you're happy for me to move on to the other side of this.
Yeah.
So, because we can all talk about the doom and gloom and how this is going to affect everything and what's going on. But here's the other side to this. So, from my side, what I didn't say at the beginning is I'm an ambassador to the People's Food and Farming Alliance, so the PFFA. I'm a coordinator with the Land Workers Alliance, the LWA. The Land Workers Alliance, if I take that, they have 3,000 UK members, all small growers, predominantly producing food organically, large amounts of produce grown in small acreage. And there is a lot of call, and I mean a lot of call, for people wanting to get into farming that can't find land. Now, that's where, so obviously from my side, I've got my fruit and veg wholesale hat on, the farm hat on, the Land Workers Alliance hat on, I've got my PFA hat on. And with the PFFA, one of the things which we're working on with that is all about the solutions. So if I go out and do a talk and I get farmers who like to come and challenge me on what I'm saying, and I quite happily accept all of their conversations at the end of the talk. And by the time I get to the end of the talk and I've covered the complete script, most of them go, "Oh, I didn't know that," because they had no idea. They've just got no idea what's going on, not really going on, the agenda as a whole. So the meeting I was talking about earlier, where I said the other night, 130 people in the room, 7 farmers in there. One of them was itching for an argument with me at the beginning of the evening. And I just said to him, look, I appreciate what you're saying, but there is 100 people in this room at least who are very awake and want to lynch you at this point. It might pay. Let me just get to the end. If you still feel the same, come have that conversation with me and we'll have that, we'll talk about that as 2 adults. He spoke to me at the end of the meeting and he walked out into the corridor, and I went to go to the toilet, and he said to me, I think I need to shake your hand. He said, you've actually woke me up on several things tonight I didn't know about. He said, Anna, I've got some land. If you wanted, someone wants to do a community project, I've actually got a nice bit on my farm, what we used to grow vegetables on. So just within that 2-hour window,
brilliant,
we'd flip that, over. And I think, there's a lot of farmers out there that when they realise what's going on, that's when the panic will set in. Because farmers traditionally, and I don't care who they are, always want to do one thing: produce something. You know, it's like someone who's worked down a mine for 50 years. That's what I do. That's what their craft is.
Yeah.
You know, whether you work in a foundry and you can produce metal, you know, they've closed all the mines, they've closed all the foundries. The next thing's to close all the farms. Why? Well, because the people who worked in the foundries could make things. If there was another war, we can't even make a bloody tank, for God's sake, because we don't even have a foundry anymore.
Mm.
You know, we can order them from China, but they might not want to send them if we're fighting them. You know,
Yeah.
So we've got the issue that there's no foundries, there's no coal. Coal is a problem. It's a bit like trees, and that's another reason we're going to have the CO2 argument, is because they want to stop us producing firewood, because if we produce firewood, we don't need the system.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you're outside of the system, that's another way to stop you producing your own heat, your own energy, whatever that might, hot water, whatever that might be. So we'll stop you cutting down trees. Okay, because we've got to get rid of this situation of this terrible stuff in the atmosphere. Well, if we keep the trees, you're going to have more oxygen, less carbon. Makes no sense. Anyway, so we end up with this scenario that if we continue down the road we are, the problems just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, and it doesn't matter what we do, there has to be a resolution for a solution. So the solution-based side is that if we can get farmers to give up land, and I'll just cover this because a lot of farmers, because of how they farmed for the last 50 years, let's say, would say off of an acre of land, if we use a chemical-based fertilizer, so let's say a nitrogen-based fertilizer, which is chemically produced, we can grow 6 to 7 ton per acre. Okay? If we use natural organic material, let's say cow manure, or we keep pigs on there for a couple of years, whatever, and you grow vegetables, you can grow 50 ton an acre. So if you're in the position that you want to grow massive amounts of food, you don't need massive amounts of space like we've been used to producing food on. Okay, so if you take the LWA members, the Land Worker Alliance, they grow small acreages but grow massive amounts of food because the soil is rich. They've put fertilizer on it, you know, natural fertilizer, compost, manures on it every year, year in, year out. They build the soil, they build the nutrition. There's a lot of good work going on. Charles Dowling, for instance, does a lot of work on no dig. So this is about, you constantly build up the top of the land, but you never ever destroy the bio in the base of the soil, so that natural bacteria get a chance to produce, to help the roots go down to get the goodness. Obviously, traditional farming, first thing we do is the minute the harvest's out the way, turn the ground over, because that stops the weeds. Yeah. So turn that land over. So all of the goodness. So you imagine how we live on this planet. Let's say you're in London and you have the people who live on the ground floor and the people who live on the 30th floor, and you come along as a farmer and you go, and now the people who are on the 30th floor are on the bottom and everything's upside down and damaged. Okay. So that's what needs to stop happening, in my opinion. This is about producing better quality land. And I'll just on that, I'll just tell you something. So the friend who I talk about, the potato and onion farmer, he said to me one day in a conversation, he said, "I'm not really a farmer." He said, "We mine for potatoes and onions." And that's how they see it. Because what they set the seed, they chuck on fertilizer, and it doesn't matter what the soil is, just a compound what they grow in. They don't see any way about enriching.
Yeah, there's no care to it. Yeah, there's no care or love or kind of interest in it.
So so if we can get back to small farmers, and this is one of the big things we need, where a lot of these farms, especially where I'm in East Anglia, there's very little else other than either cereal crops or potato crop, or a sugar beet crop. We need to get back to small, not large, small mixed farms. So these are farms there where you have animals as well as your vegetables and your cereals, and you work on a 4-year rota. So every year you have something new on that field, and it goes round in a 4-year cycle. So naturally, you get your manure, your natural manure from your animals so you put grass on there 1 year, the next year you put the animals on there to graze it. They go on to the next field, you then turn that over, and it's got natural nitrogen in it, so you can put something like wheat or barley in it, or a vegetable in it, and then you get 2 years out of that, and you start again. So you just keep going around in 4-year cycles, and then the ground's full of natural nitrogen. So if you grow clover, for instance, clover is fantastic for nitrogen, and it's brilliant as a grazing crop, for instance. You are starting to see some of the farms now putting in things like what we call cover crops. So you grow these in the winter, something like turnips or radishes or something like that, where you grow them in the winter. They put a lot of nitrogen into the ground, and to get rid of the crop rather than harvest it out, you then put animals on there to eat the crop and naturally fertilize the soil. And that is the absolute pièce de résistance way to commercially farm on a bigger scale. Because one of the problems is that a lot of the smaller farming practices only work on a small scale. So we have these real good quality farmers at this level and really big farmers over here that are working on a traditional basis. And somewhere we need to bridge that gap. So there needs to be this transition where some of this information from the smaller growers is ascertained by the bigger producers to change to that style of farming. And there needs to be some way
integration of the best of the best coming together. So what is it about the small farm what's the best thing about the small farm? What's the best thing about the larger farm?
I do not believe, and I hate to say this, and people will probably skin me for what I'm about to say, especially from my, if I say my LWA hat on, my PFA hat on, same hat, different, but that you cannot produce the amount of food the country needs working in that environment.
The small one.
The small ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
The commercial side can grow the amount of food we need, but it's not growing in a natural, sustainable manner. So we have this almost nonsensical commercial, you could grow this shit in a bloody container for crying out loud. It's got no goodness, no naturalness to it, no sunlight's needed for it.
Why? What's unnatural about it? Just like the fertilizer, what the
fertilizer. So if you take, for instance, what I'm going to call it as a natural side. So small farmers, all the goodness that vegetable needs, all of it, lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels, is in the soil. Okay. The big farms, there's no goodness in the soil at all, so they're having to add constantly nitrogen-based fertilizers. So there's just no goodness in the soil. So the natural minerals, the natural vitamins, what should be in that produce, are not there. So the goodness in actual, when you come to eat it, there is no goodness. It's just like taking a bottle of water and drinking it, because there's nothing else. It's just no taste, no goodness, no value. Yes, it will sustain you. It's a bit like I was saying about the carrots with the animals. They'll sustain your body, but they won't give you that goodness you need to be able to nourish.
So the only good thing about the large farm is the size of it and the sphere of influence it would have. And what's the bad and the only bad thing about the small farm is the fact it's small. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you could find an equal middle ground there, where and I think the answer to this lies in the public, I have to say, right? Because if you've got a small farm and you grow small amounts of food, you can grow a lot of volume of food in a small area. So if you was to take, let's say, a 10-acre field, is a huge commitment for someone to try and grow by hand. However, through the PFFA, what we're looking at is the volunteer side of things to get the general public involved in helping with community projects. Now, community projects might look like a community vegetable growing garden in the village, or, you know, a joint allotment. But I think what we're going to see is a lot more bigger projects. So where these will be, for instance, I've set up a CIC with a friend, a community interest company. We've got a 16-acre field, which we're now putting down at the moment. And this is where two sides can work together. So what we've done, and this is my uncle's idea, he said, if we set at the same time barley and grass seed, the two come up together. Within 5 months, you're going to have produced the barley, cut it, got the grain off of it, and you have the straw and everything off of that. So a real quick window, you've got a crop off of it to get cash from. But if you set the grass seed at the same time, the grass, as it grows, deals with all the weed situation. So you don't have to put any nasty stuff on to get rid of any, you know, glyphosates on there to get rid of the weeds, because it's naturally dealt with by the grass. It's also putting natural nitrogen into the ground, which is feeding the barley. And then when you get to the end of the year, you turn the grass in, and you've then got really nice, rich soil to be able to grow your vegetables in next year. So and that's a classic example of how we can go from one side of farming to the other. So that's a 16-acre site under the organisation that I say, the Community Interest Foundation. The project's the ARC project on that one. And that is to bring volunteers together to produce both animals and vegetables.
So are you bringing farmers together, or just community, like members from the community, or what?
Both. Bear in mind, who's got the most experience in the world for growing food? Farmers. Yeah. Now, they're used to growing on a big scale. You know, and if you get a small producer who's used to growing in, you know, like allotment size production and a few polytunnels, suddenly they've got this massive amount of land and don't know how to farm that amount of land. The farmer, who's used to growing hundreds of acres, knows exactly how to grow on that scale. So what we need to do is bring the two of them together. One of the things I do see being a challenge on the bigger farms as we roll forward. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a battery-powered combine. How that would work if you actually had to roll that thing 24 hours a day, I don't know, you know. But if you get rid of diesel, as you know, which they're trying to do, trying to get rid of all the diesel and so forth, you won't be able to grow food on that scale. So that's another issue which the farmers are going to have to deal with as we roll forward. But you could grow on a small scale or somewhere in between. So if you've got one person growing on, let's say, an allotment size, how many people do you need to assist in that to grow on, let's say, like me, a 16-acre site? So if you're in the position you need 100 people and you've got tens of thousands of people that are hungry, it probably won't be difficult to find the amount of people you need. And that's where I think the changeover will happen once people realise. But on the other side of that, I will say that there needs to be some forward thinking. This is, again, within the PFFA, and I see this in the LWA. Seed saving banks is something that is really important, because seed saving. So if you, for instance, like I grow heritage tomatoes. So these are the seeds that I've saved from last year, from the year before, from the year before, from the year before, and the same seeds get used to grow the vegetables next year. You save the seed and you do it again, and you gradually end up with lots of seeds, more than you need, which you then share with other people. The problem is that the likes of, you know, for instance, Bill Gates or Monsanto, for instance, have bought up most of the seed companies and genetically changed the seed so it will not grow without the appropriate fertilizer being put on it. So it won't grow on our soil. It won't grow on, you know, with the chemicals, or let's say the substances we might want to use. I mean, I'll give you a classic example of this. My granddad, when he used to grow a lot of vegetables and so forth, it was before nitrogen was really come about for a thing for farming. So what they used to do is they used to take stinging nettles and comfrey leaves, and soak them in vats of water, in big tanks of water. And if you leave it for about 6 months, you end up with this really stinky black liquid, but it's liquid nitrogen. So that's what they used to then just dip the watering can in and feed all the plants with it. You didn't need chemicals, but they stopped doing it because it smelt, and it was a long process where you could just have the bulk lorry turn up and deliver you a load of nitrogen. You put it on the field, 2 days later it was done and dusted. Right, so it was easier to deal with. They're the things we need to find out and to get back to. If you look at, for instance, a few years, let's say back in the 80s, for instance, farmers were paid to grow crops on bigger fields, take out all the hedgerows. So the reason that was put into play was because if you take out the hedgerows, you get rid of the natural birds. So the birds would happily feast all day long on insects what were damaging the crops. So if you take away the hedges, you don't need the birds, but you've now got a problem on the crop. Oh, that's okay. We can give you a pesticide for that. So Monsanto or someone like that would come up with a system as where you could just go along with a tractor and a big sprayer and kill off all the bugs. You didn't have to worry about the point there wasn't any hedgerows. Now farmers are being encouraged to put the hedgerows back because under the net zero, we need to get rid of the chemicals. So the only way to get rid of the chemicals is to find another solution. The best solution is what nature provides. So we put the hedgerows back, naturally the birds come back, the birds deal with the insects, and voila, we don't have an issue.
Well, that's what nature should be like, isn't it? It's cyclical. It feeds back into itself. That's the biosphere.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's nature, isn't it? So are they okay, so the solution here, the game plan here, is to start with the small farmers, right, and syndicate them, get them connected, get them working with each other, get them as a community, right?
Yes.
Is there anything else they can do, or is there anything now that we can say for just your average person can do? I mean, are we telling them to start their own communities, get your own allotments, grow your own fruit and veg?
Absolutely.
Connecting with other people where you can share your fruit and veg. Maybe we can create some kind of delivery system from the farms as well, so people can go direct to the farms.
Sure.
Something like that.
So there's an interesting point. So one of the things which I've been working on within the PFFA is to work really closely with a guy called Nick, who organises a thing called the Open Food Network. So for people who haven't heard about that, look that up. You'll find it on Google easy enough. It's the Open Food Network. And what it is a worldwide database of all farmers that want, or producers. So this might be a dairy who produces cheese or butter, for instance. So producers who take an ingredient and turn it into something, and they want to sell direct to the general public. Okay? So the farmers list their produce, and the customers look for what they're looking for. So, and in between the two of them sits normally a food hub. So the food hub is the distribution point for the produce. So let's say there's 20 farmers around a town, and all 20 farmers grow one thing. So one grows potatoes, one grows carrots, one grows onions, one grows cabbages, one grows cauliflower, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Member of the public goes on and says, okay, I want a cabbage, I want a cauliflower, I want the carrots, I want the onions, I want the potatoes, I want this, want this, want this. What then happens is that order goes into the hub along with all the other orders. And as a result of that, what happens is the hubs then get all the stuff in direct from all the farms, make up the orders, and deliver the orders to the public.
Yeah, this is it. This is what we need. And then it gets us direct to the farmers rather than the supermarkets.
Absolutely.
It's supply and demand, isn't it? We hit them on that level. And
absolutely.
I think people do want to go to local farms, but it's just a kind of convenience thing. And also it's a bit hazy. I'm just trying to think, from my point of view, there's a farm down the road, but it doesn't really tell me what they've got. Does it have a website? Can I even go in? Is this like, is this somewhere is this a commercial farm, or is this something that he's just running for himself? There's this thing where it's a little bit kind of a disconnect between farms and the people. Well, wouldn't it be good to create that connection again and make it clear what farms do, make it very accessible, have a little cafe in there, get people to come in, see the produce, that kind of thing, right?
Well, I think what you're going to see is I think these food hubs will take a completely different form to what we're used to. So if you take a supermarket, that's exactly what they've created. They've got the cafe, they've got the reason to stay, they've got the parking, they've got all of this, right? So that power, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the power that the system holds is for one reason. We give it to them. We spend our money in the supermarkets supporting the system. If the general public takes away that power, which they can do really easily, and I mean really easily, just stop it. Just stop going through the door. Stop giving them your money. Start looking for other alternatives. And the Open Food Network definitely 100% gives that opportunity for people to do that.
So that is the hub. So this is being built right now, is it? Is it a new thing?
So the Open Food Network is an open source website,
right,
which is worldwide,
right,
and thousands upon thousands of producers and growers are listed on there, and you can go in and register in your town to be able to buy stuff. So the public are there, the farmers are there, the food hubs. I did a video on this the other day, which I put out on social media. And 186 people replied to me within an hour saying this is a fantastic idea. How do we get involved? Obviously, what I hadn't given consideration to on that video was just how far social media travels. So where I was talking about Bury St Edmunds, where I live, I had people inquiring from all over the world. So I've pushed them all towards the Open Food Network because they were all people who wanted to buy direct from farms.
Fantastic.
So what I've done is I've set up a system straight away, just message back saying, here's the website link to the Open Food Network. Go on and find what's available in your area. So what we're going to see, what I believe we're going to see over the course of next year is more of the smaller farmers producing vegetables that can be accessed via the food hubs to supply to the general public.
Yeah.
And if ever there was the time for this to happen, it's now.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be a grassroots uprising right now. That's the way that we have to defeat this, a bottom-up movement. Putting the power back in the people's hands again, going back to the earth, isn't it? Going back to nature, going locally. That's how it has to be done. I was going to say, because just to give you an example, I was looking for raw milk, right, in my area.
Good luck.
30 miles I have to drive to find raw milk. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, so this is the issue. This is the reason why people just go, sod it, I'll just go to my Sainsbury's 30 seconds away.
Yeah.
You know, like, why is this happening? Right. How is it that you have to go 30 miles to get milk, raw milk?
Well, within the PFFA, one of the campaigns we've got coming up is about raw milk. Yeah. And people would not believe what farmers have to go through to be able to sell raw milk.
Right.
So it's legislation based that farmers have just gone, oh, I just can't be bothered with it.
Yeah, right.
So if that was taken away, then I think you would see a lot of micro dairies then where people would have 5 or 10 cows, and you would see that expand quite quickly across the country. But at the moment, the bureaucracy is stopping people getting into that. So a lot of farmers that have got 200 to 500 cows could sell raw milk at the gate, but do not because they cannot.
All right, yeah,
because they cannot supply into the system and supply at the gate.
Yeah, they're being squeezed out on every level, aren't they? Every opportunity, they're being sort of
But I do think there is, if we get back to smaller mixed farms, there is the opportunity for 10 cows to be on a farm.
Yeah, to
be used for the fertilizer. And to be used for the dairy side. And
also, the grazing, because I don't know if you see, is it Food Inc? I know that's from America, but it's where they were replacing, instead of grass-fed, they were giving them corn, and then they were developing lots of, the livestock were developing lots of issues with that. And then they were pumping them, injecting them full of all types of antibiotics and stuff like that. Does that go on over here? How can you be sure that like the meat that you're eating over here is fresh, it's like grass fed? Can you or not?
What I would suggest to anybody is do not eat supermarket meat. And I'll give you a good example of this. I will not buy New Zealand lamb.
Oh, really?
Now, there's 2 reasons I won't. One, because I want to buy English, and people say, yeah, but New Zealand lamb's half the price. Let me give you a little lesson in lamb. Okay, so when lamb leaves New Zealand, it's fresh, sealed in a container, filled with carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Which holds it in a state so that it cannot decay. So that boat might take 8 to 12 weeks to get here, depending on which route it takes. So for 8 to 12 weeks, that meat's held in limbo. It's not frozen. I naturally assumed that it came into the country frozen.
Yeah.
And that's how they travelled it here. No, it's just gassed. So you gas it, and that holds it in a preserved state. And then obviously when you undo the container and the gas goes out, it then starts to decay like normal meat. So your meat is already 12, 14, 16 weeks old before you get it to the supermarket shelf.
Is that just the lamb or all New Zealand produce?
Well, all meat what travels into the UK comes in that way. If it isn't coming in from like France, for instance, where it's very fresh and can come across very quickly. So for me, I don't eat supermarket meat. I go to a proper butcher. I know the butcher.
Yeah.
You know, I can go in there and say, where does that come from, Beefy? And he'll say to me, well, that comes from so-and-so farm. And I say, lovely, what about that? Yeah, that's from so-and-so producers, and that's a good beat, that's a good cut. And this, he knows the farmers, he knows the factory, you know, the slaughterhouse, what he's working with. He knows, he can chase back everything to see where the animals come from.
How can we be sure that the animals are eating the grass and not corn?
Well, this comes down to the same thing again. So the smaller butchers, and people say, yeah, but that meat's so much more expensive. Yes, it is, because it's good quality meat. So most of on the smaller butchers will use grass-fed meat. It's just a completely different meat. There's no, it's like eating chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
So most of the smaller farmers, smaller butchers will be using meat from the abattoirs and the meat wholesalers that only supply that level of meat. If you take the supermarkets, for instance, there's this all commercial meat. So this is coming from farms with thousands of animals going through the system on a daily basis. So I mean, I'll give you a classic example on this. I know a friend of mine runs a pig farm. So the pigs are not his. He literally offers bed and breakfast service for the pigs. So he has the farm. Somebody else owns the pigs. They drop them off as piglets. They supply the food. He feeds them exactly the right amount for 16 weeks. And in 16 weeks to the day, they will weigh exactly this. And a lorry will pick them up and take them to the slaughterhouse. And a new lot comes in. And that's how it works. Where for me, when I'm breeding my own pigs, we feed them on vegetables and all sorts. So instead of taking 16 weeks to get to weight, they might take 16 months. But the meat you end up with at the end, you can go, that's had nothing nasty in it. It's only been fed on fruit and veg or, green items. It's not that it's been fed on grains, or it's not that it's been fed on food that I don't know where it's come from. And that's the important thing, because the food supply for the animals is no different to the food supply for humans. It's all got in it what they want in it, be assured.
What are the questions you ask let's say you go to a local butcher, there's one on my high street near me, right? So what are the sort of questions you make sure as a quality check? Do you say, where's the meat come from? Is it locally sourced, which I'm presuming it must be, but just how close is it? And then how close does it need to be? As long as it's England, that's close enough or not?
That's my always mine is, is this British? And again, John, the reason I say about this is the standards that British farmers have to work under through Defra are extremely high. So how the animals are looked after, how they're managed, how they're fed, everything is really, really high. If you take, for instance, so let's take grain as an example. We work under real strict regulations, and to produce that might cost 140 to 145 pound a ton at that quality. Okay. You can buy Ukrainian grain for 80 pound a ton, delivered into a processing plant in the UK. So why would they use British wheat? Well, maybe because it hasn't got all the nasty chemicals, and all the weapons of war which have been used to destroy every field around it and everything else. So you start looking at, are we talking like for like?
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the British farmers have been, protesting about in London recently, especially, is about the import costs for food, because they're just not grown to the same standards. Animals are not reared to the same standards. So we have the red tractor, for instance, in the UK, which means it has to fit a certain criteria, it has to fit a certain standard. And to my honest opinion, that is a low standard anyway. If you take someone like myself who produce, vegetables or pigs, that would be a completely different, such a high level of quality as opposed to red tractor. And red tractor's high in comparison to the rest of the world. So the farmers that work under red tractor, they cannot grow food on an equal basis to the imported stuff. They chuck any chemicals they want on it in China. I guarantee you, if you buy organic garlic from China, it's been dipped in bleach. That's why it's white. Otherwise, garlic is naturally grey. If you buy it, it's beautiful. It's all lovely and white. There's no way that is not dipped in bleach.
Right.
And that's how they. So
yeah.
What are the standards? And these standards are very different country to country. So how can a British farmer produce anything on the same platform as the imported stuff, right? So that then says to me that if people want to buy cheap food, that's going to be coming from a source what you cannot guarantee the quality of that food. And if you want to guarantee the quality of that food, go to a local butcher, a local farm shop, whatever that might need to look like. There's some fantastic people out there producing food that are not getting the leverage they deserve because it's all based on price
and convenience. So what do you say? You just say, is it local? Is it grass fed? Would you even ask them what the seed is? Would they know that?
I don't think most of them would know that, but it's certainly if you talk to a butcher's going to know if they're, if it's grass fed. He's going to know. One of the big things that I've seen in the meat industry, especially, is the amount of hormones that are pumped into.
Exactly.
Especially when we start looking at MNRAs.
I was going to ask you about that as well at some point. Like Bill Gates' latest venture, isn't
it? Interestingly, there was a Freedom of Information Act put onto Defra to ask them where they stood on the MNRA use in the UK. And they said, as a government agency, they're not responsible for it.
How can they not be responsible for it?
If it's in animals, how can they not be responsible? If it's in the land, how can they not be responsible?
Yeah.
We can't yet find out who is responsible. So is that because it's been used as a weapon, so the MOD hold it? We can't find out.
Really? Even with the freedom of information?
We don't know who to ask, do you? Once Defra said it isn't them, who do you then go to ask? You could ask every governmental department. Somebody is responsible for it.
Is it going into the meat over here?
We're told no.
Yeah, I think it's America at the moment, isn't it?
America. But we all know what comes after America. The rest of us. They trial it over there. Again, that's why I say you need to know where that food comes from. You need to be in the position that when you go to the butcher and the butcher looks you in the eye and you say, like I do, listen, Beefy, where does the meat come from? And he says, that comes from that farm, that comes from there. I've got Irish grass-fed beef. I know it's not English, but that is the best you can get. I accept that. Or you can get this beef here from Argentina, what was sent on a 4-month excursion to get it here.
So all you need to know is local and grass-fed. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, certainly for the beef side and the lamb side, yes.
What else do you need to know for the other meats then?
I mean, pork isn't traditionally. They're not grazing animals, so they're traditionally fed on.
Like cereal corn and
on cereals.
Yeah,
and again, how has it been produced? Is this something where they're produced indoors? Is this something where they've had a good life outdoors? Have they been outside in the fresh air? Have they been running about? Have they been, because some of these farms are huge and they're all about massive production. Some of these farms are, where if you take, for instance, Chinese meat, I don't know if you've seen this, but, and I'll just cover something else on that as well and why they did it. Chinese meat is grown in like a multi-story car park. So these farms it's a factory farm. It's 30 floors tall. And all the pig piss runs down the pipes, and is collected, and that's called urea, and that's called AdBlue in lorries. And that's why they came up with AdBlue to go through the fuel system in vehicles to reduce the amount of emissions. Doesn't achieve anything, but that's why vehicles now have AdBlue in them, because it was the only way they could get rid of the amount of urine they were producing from these factory farmed pigs.
Oh, what? And it goes into the fuel.
Yeah. So you know how AdBlue works on a vehicle? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not actually. Sorry, Mark. Is that ignorant of me?
Okay, so AdBlue is an additive you put into, and it works in a separate tank, and it's fed into the fuel system of the vehicle.
Right.
And it allegedly makes the fuel burn cleaner.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you cannot take a vehicle into the exclusion zones in London. You know, if it doesn't fit in a certain criteria. One of those is the newer vehicles all have to have AdBlue.
And
AdBlue is made from. It's made from urea, which is pig piss. And they came about because when they started factory farming pigs, they ended up with so much pig piss, they didn't know what to do with it. So they had to find a use for it.
I mean, would you then say to the butcher? Would you say to the butcher then? Just going back to that, would you say like have the pigs had a good life? I mean, what'd you say?
Yeah, I mean, you know, have they come from? Are they factory farmed? Is it factory farmed meat, or is this something what's been, you know, bred in the field? Because that's important. Because you know, no matter how you look at it, if the animals had a good life, you're going to have good quality meat. If it's been fed on something nice, you're going to have good quality meat. I personally won't buy mass-produced meat of any description.
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion, because I don't want the chemicals what are in it. If you take the antibiotics, for instance, what they pump into, let's say, into the dairy industry, especially, when that meat it then comes up, when the cows come to the end of its life, and you then turn it into meat, the antibiotics what are in that meat is second to none. I don't want that. I want a nice young, you know, heifer. What's come through is young, nice, tender meat. You know exactly what you're getting. It's been grass fed. You know, and when you say grass fed, grass fed doesn't necessarily mean it's been kept on grass all year. No, bear that in mind. It might not have been in the field all the year. It might have been through the winter. You might have put it in a barn, but you might have fed it on haylage or silage or, you know, or whatever that might be, hay, whatever.
That's okay.
Are all grass.
That's okay. And that's okay.
Fine.
Yeah, because it's still grass-based. So
absolutely. So that's that naturalness to it, you know, that which gives you a good quality meat, and that is where the public needs to understand. When we talk about meat, bear in mind that in my lifetime we've gone from everyone having a pig in the garden to no one being allowed to keep a pig in the garden, because that's terrible. You can't have that because, you know, well, it's diseases and everything. You know, and we need to be getting back to people having their own animals. Now, that might be that people buy into a community project, and the community project might say, well, we're going to have 50 pigs and everybody buys a pig. So the pig belongs to the person. Yeah. But on the community farm. And when it goes off to slaughter, you pay for it to be slaughtered and you get the meat back. You fill your freezer. And that is a great way to do it.
We need to decentralize it somehow. And I think the community-based thing is a great idea. If that open food network, I think that's what you said, isn't it? That's a great start. Yeah. Because I'll go straight on there.
That's a phenomenal, and I absolutely cannot emphasize enough. And that's one of the big things from the PFFA side that we're pushing forward. Lots of the LWA members are registered on there as producers. There's lots of farms that run what we're going to call like schemes, let's say, for instance, that are box schemes. So whether they're CSAs, which is a community supported agriculture, so volunteers get involved in growing the food, and then they get to take, you know, they get to buy that as a box of food for, let's say, 26 weeks of the year through the summer when they produce that produce. Or that might be that they're commercial organic farms, for instance, so they have staff there what grow that produce, and they just sell the boxes, or they supply it into their farm shop, whatever. There's loads of options out there for people to look at this. You know, you've got big ones, for instance, like Riverford. They're huge, you know, although they do agree with net zero, and I struggle with that one. But, you know, But there's lots of people out there that collectively are coming together to produce a better quality food.
Can you join this even if you live in a big city? Is it still worth joining this?
Yeah. There's so many schemes out there will deliver into the cities and grow in the cities as well. And let's face it, John, the more demand, the more it will happen.
It'll have to happen, just through supply and demand, right? And we need to change the mentality of people, I think.
Absolutely.
Is the other thing.
People need to question where the food's coming from. They need to question how it's produced, how it's grown, what chemicals went on it. Was there any Roundup went on it, for instance? Was there any glyphosates went on it? Was there any nasty stuff of any description used on this stuff, whether it's pesticides, whatever.
Do we still have a chance? Do we still have a chance though with all the spraying and stuff? I mean, can you still have organic food with all the spraying?
Do you want me to answer that honestly?
Yeah, I mean, because it's almost like we need to sort of encourage people to not think about that for now. We just need to get them on board. That's the thing, isn't it?
I think so. And I think that if you understand that if we produce apple A or apple B, and apple A has got 200 different chemicals on it, and this one's got a tiny little bit what's been put into the atmosphere.
We'll still have that one. Yeah.
We'll still have that one.
Yeah.
What I do think is that you will see a lot of polytunnels going up over the next few years. We're certainly putting extra ones up on the family farm now.
What's a polytunnel?
So polytunnel, so this is the hoops of metal.
Yeah.
And you put a ridge of those down the field, let's say 50, 60 foot long.
Yeah.
Cover that in plastic, and the plastic's then, whether that's entrenched in the ground or whatever, and you grow inside that. So it's like a greenhouse, but it's a lot easier to put up and a lot easier and a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And you could grow inside them with obviously out the amount of atmospheric conditioning that there might be if planes keep flying over, dropping stuff out the sky.
It's still going to get into the soil though, either way though, isn't it?
It's not going to get into the soil in the polytunnel.
Oh, really? Oh, it doesn't bleed in, no? Okay, so it's like it's
whilst there is a tiny bit, there could be the potential of a tiny bit of bleeding. You're not going to get the amount falling physically onto the vegetables,
no,
like you would there in an open field.
Okay, all right. You can partition it off. You can segment it off. Okay,
yeah,
that's good.
So because
I was going to say, can you not just have greenhouses? I mean, like for vegetables, does that not still work or not? Is it just the cost of it or what?
It's the I mean, to put up a good sized greenhouse now is over £1 million.
What? A greenhouse?
A greenhouse. I'm talking if you produce something which is a quarter of an acre, which is not a lot of space to grow in.
Yeah.
You'd be talking about £250,000, but a quarter of an acre.
What, just for some glass?
Yeah. But if you do it in plastic, it would be about a tenth of the cost.
Right.
Probably not even a tenth of the cost, a 20th of the cost.
Yeah, but you need the glass because you need the right sunlight, don't you? I'm sure like the
polytunnels you can grow exactly the same. There's no difference. You can grow exactly the same under glass as you can under plastic. There's no difference.
Yeah, okay.
Not that I've found anyway. I don't use any glass at all. I only produce under plastic.
Okay.
And if you take the likes of supermarkets, for instance, if you go out to either Spain or Kenya, they have vast, thousands of acres of plastic, what they grow all their stuff in.
It's funny, isn't it? The West, our food industry is being completely destroyed, and our mentality and the way that we look at it. But it's almost like the East, the further East you go, sort of like they're still hanging on to some semblance of health there. Like you go to Eastern Europe, they're quite proud of like the food, and they joke about how bad our food is. If you go to
absolutely,
Eastern Europe, they talk about that, and that you can taste the difference in the meat actually when you go out there.
Not just the meat.
Everything,
vegetables, everything taste. And this is one of the things, again, if you start looking at hydroponically grown food, for instance, near where I live, they put up a massive glass house about, 5 years ago, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, which is owned by the Bomb Group, a German company. And it's vast. It grows 3% of the peppers in the UK, what are consumed in the UK. And you bite one, it's like biting a glass of water. There's just nothing that the red, the green, the yellow all taste the same because they're all grown hydroponically. So for me, that isn't what I want. I want to be able to taste somewhere I go, my God, the flavour, the taste, the naturalness to it, And what I do see as well, what's going to happen, in my opinion on this is obviously from a fruit and veg wholesale side here, you're starting to see a shift in the mentality of the chefs, that the chefs want something different. They want something tasty, flavoursome, wholesome. So I think that, again, will drive the right stuff to be produced. Because I think if we had a campaign now like someone like Jamie Oliver, who has pushed and pushed and pushed for good quality food, you know, someone like proper well-known, you know, TV celebrity chefs got involved now on this scale of pushing. We need to push several things. So we need to push, 1, locally produced, 2, naturally produced, and 3, seasonally produced. Because we're so used to going, I want a punnet of strawberries 52 weeks a year, and that's what I want. Well, the reality is strawberries naturally in this country might grow for 8 weeks. You know, use someone else. And I think unless we get back to that mentality, and that's got to be driven by the chefs, in my opinion, is because, you know, every time Jamie Oliver puts out how to make the best roast potatoes, every woman in the country is going, oh my God, this is how we do roast potatoes. You know, so
well, he did a good job on school dinners. You know, I don't know if you've seen that, where he was going into the schools and he was actually breaking down what was in a chicken nugget, and he made it in front of the kids. And you know, he said, "It's all this shit, this is bones and all this," you know. And then they were going, ugh, and then once he wrapped it into a little, you know, a nugget, they all ate it. They were yeah. But if you were to get someone like him as an ambassador for the Open Food Network, maybe maybe we can send him this video. Maybe we can, or send some of your other videos. Get him involved somehow. Invite him down for the day for, like, I know you do a lot of talks and stuff. Is there any way we can sort of do that? Maybe.
I think certainly from the PFFA side, that's something we would love to see. So obviously I'm an ambassador of the PFFA. That's something where my thought is they're kind of the missing key at the moment.
Right.
Producers are starting to step up to producing a better quality food. That's going to be driven by the demand of the public. But what's going to drive that demand from the public? If the public aren't going to wake up to what's really going on with the food system until it's too late, then maybe they get woken up in a different manner. That different manner might be celebrity chefs, let's say, for instance, saying, you know, have you thought about locally produced, seasonally produced, naturally produced, and getting that ethos back into people? Because obviously, you know, in my lifetime, when I was a kid, you know, there's the bowl, Mark, go round up the gooseberries, or there's a knife, go and cut some rhubarb, whatever it was. We didn't eat unless it was in the garden. That's
why there's an astronomical rise in cancer. That's why we're getting cancers through astronomical, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, 1, probably from the chemicals, but 2, I actually did a show on this recently, and this guy was explaining how the toxicity builds up in the body because you're not eating whole foods. It has to be metabolized. If you're not eating those whole foods, the toxicity just builds up and builds up, and then obviously it's like, you know, it comes out in ways you don't want it to. So yeah, that's
it's interesting. I was talking to a friend this morning who's he's just now going through a cleansing process for his body, and he's only eating natural fruit and veg, nothing else. And he said it takes about 14 to 15 days to clean your body, to clean your bowel out, and you get to the point where you end up like inside your bowel, you build up this thick lining, okay, and that builds up all kinds of nasty bacteria in it, and you need to get rid of that out of your body. So what happens is, as you clean your bowels out, you gradually get rid of all the nasty stuff, and then this lining comes out, which is stuck to the inside of your bowel, and that's all the chemicals and the build-up of all this this nasty produced food, which then gives you the ability to then, you know, to go forward and to then start, and your body then won't be allergic to gluten, for instance, because you've got rid of the problem. So it's just this build-up of chemicals inside the body that, you know, certainly sees up your joints, or, you know, your kidneys start to fail, or your heart starts to fail as a result of all this chemical build-up in your body, and that's an issue which natural food will get rid of.
Yeah, the whole food, the natural food gets rid of it. That's actually why, you know, all the supplement industries come about. And I don't know if you noticed, but that's actually owned to a large degree by the pharmaceutical industry.
It is now, yeah.
Because people think, oh, I'm short of that. That's not in the soil. I'm not getting that nutrient. I'll just take that in a pill form. That's not the way to do it. That's a disconnected way of actually healing the body. You've got to go back to whole foods to metabolize.
100%.
And but that's it. Again, it's another kind of trickery that they do. Oh, we don't get that.
This is one of the problems with people.
Nothing you're going to get in a pill form is going to heal you.
No. And this is one of the problems with whole milk, because whole milk makes a lot of people ill. Right. Because their body cannot process it. Because of the buildup of toxins in the body, and they go, "Oh, I had that, and I was so ill when I had that." It's no good for you. You've got to have pasteurized milk. No, it's really good for you. It's trying to cleanse your body. That's why you're so ill, because it's trying to get rid of the toxins out of your body.
Exactly, and the illness is actually you healing yourself. It's the
healing
body.
Yourself, yeah.
It's all we're coming out of a bubble of deception, basically. We've decades or hundreds of years worth of deception and lies and being taught the wrong thing.
It's scary, isn't it? I mean, when you go, I'm in my 50s, so for me, when I go back to everything I was taught at school, exactly, was a lie.
I know, it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Whether that was, from my opinion, whether that was man walking on the moon, or to what we should eat or how we should grow, everything's a lie.
Contagion theory, that's another one. Just finally, because I appreciate your time, by the way. I was going to say, do you think veganism is part of the agenda as well? Because I think it is. What's your opinion on that?
I won't name the person. But this person was came into my family. He's since gone, because the person he was with saw the light, let's say. I won't say how or why, but while he was part of the family, he was involved in going around shutting slaughterhouses, okay, by being a vegan, and would go out with a group of 20 of them, and they were paid by the Gates Foundation indirectly to go around and protest at these sites until they caused so much trouble for the site that the site would just go, because these are small abattoirs, they would just go, "Oh, it's not worth it. We just can't deal with it." So they just close the abattoir down. And he was part of that. And they were paid £35 a day to protest. 20 of them, £700 a day. They'd go and protest probably 10 times. The abattoir would give up. So £7,000 spent by somebody on an agenda to close the abattoir. Now all the small abattoirs are gone. The likes of me now struggle to find an abattoir to take the meat to. So this is the other side. So when I was a kid, where I live, in the village we lived there, within 3 miles, there was an abattoir, any direction. All the neighbouring villages had abattoirs. Now there isn't one. Our nearest one's like 60 miles away.
So why do they want us to not eat meat then, do you think?
Well, I think it's because of the protein. Personally, I think that's a big part of it. It's been sold on the grounds that, cows fart and that's damaging the atmosphere. Nonsense. But I think what the reality is, they do not want us to have a source of protein, because if there's no protein, you get ill. Or they sell you the protein, an unnatural protein. Here's like you say, do you want the red protein or the blue protein?
The synthetic pea protein, whatever, that's all that kind of stuff.
Or maggots, whatever it might be, whatever your protein.
Bugs, eat the bugs.
Eat the bugs. You will eat the bugs. So I think there is that is a big part of it. And I think, if you take away the meat, where do you get your protein? Well, then we can sell you something what we can produce in a lab.
Yeah, the synthetic lab meat. But do you also think that from the veganism aspect, they want us with the vegan diet, because is that not sprayed with glyphosates more?
Isn't that interesting?
Is it though? Is it? Do you think?
I think that's a big part of it. When you start bolting all these things together, like I say, one thing on its own isn't an issue. When you start bolting them together, so now you've taken away the protein, you've increased the amount of chemicals they're having.
Yeah, exactly.
You've taken away the sunlight.
It's not whole food anymore. So
you start putting all these things together, and then you go, no wonder people are getting ill.
Exactly.
Like you said, cancer's gone through the roof. There's all these things you have to take into account. When I'm going out doing talks, it's just comical, really, the belief structure that people have got. When I think, John, when I was a kid at school, we had a vegetable garden at the school. So every child was encouraged to grow vegetables, to understand how to save the seeds. We did that as a class. We'd save the seeds and dry the seeds and make sure they were put away for next year. And, we dug the garden ourselves and we grew things ourselves. And, with one of the teachers' help, and we were encouraged to do that.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a 9-year-old, and the only thing they teach him at school, he had a letter come out the other day to say that they're going to be, what did they, it's called a swap day. So you can swap being a boy for a girl for the day if you want.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I said. I said, you ain't going to that. His mum said, that'd be fun. No. And when I explained what the agenda was, she was horrified. And that is, just again,
it's the same.
All together.
It's the same process with schools. I think you've got to start taking the kids out now. It's got to the point now where they're just
100%.
These sort of neo-Marxist indoctrination camps, and they're pushing this agenda in there, this rainbow agenda. I've got nothing against anyone who wants to be gay, but I think when you're pushing this onto kids and you're trying to teach them fetishes,
I'm exactly the same. I don't care
sexuality at that young age. It's not right. And and you've just got activists now as teachers now, and they're pushing this political agenda in there. I think you've got to get the kids out and you've got to homeschool them. Again, you've got to take the power back into your own hands and bring it back into the family, because they want to destroy the nuclear family. They want to control the food source. So the way to combat that is you do the opposite. You grow the food locally. You see your local farmer. You take your kids. You homeschool them if you can. I know it's not easy. It might not be possible, but at least make a start. Maybe there's communities. Anyone that's watching this, maybe the mums can get together. Maybe there's a way that you can all link in with each other and homeschool the kids together and create that little community that way.
I see a massive locally where I'm in Bury St Edmunds. There's a massive increase in the amount of kids that are getting taken out of school, and I mean massive amount. And through the care farm side, my ex-partner's still running a care farm which we set up together, and with that, she has an after-school club. She has home education days. She has volunteer days, and that's all about getting kids to go there and participate in growing the vegetables, to looking after and feeding the animals, so they get a sense of importance. And I fed the chicken gave me eggs. I set the tomato seeds, the tomato plant gave me tomatoes, and we need to all feel and touch the earth. In my opinion, we don't get, we all wear rubber-soled shoes to stop us getting earthed out.
That's
so
another thing.
Energy.
Another part of detoxifying the body is to ground yourself with bare feet on the grass, because what 100%. That does is it opens up the cells and it releases the toxins. If you don't, then it kind of, it keeps everything sort of calcified within the body. That's an important part of the release, is actually to ground yourself with bare feet, as well as the diet as well. You should actually link in with David Edelman. I don't know if you know this guy, but
I've not heard of him.
He does talks up and down the country about homeschooling children. He talks about the dangers of schools. There might be something that you could do together where there's some kind of crossover with the education side and the food side, and the what do you call it, the circulation of food. How we build that community together, because once you've got a community in the food side, the next stage would be to combine it with other communities that are working in the education side, let's say the grassroots side of it anyway, and then we form it up, we block it up from the cell level to the organs to the organisms, like that's the from the small to the micro to the macro, but we build up small blocks together, link all the blocks together.
And then the blocks come together. It's interesting what you said about home tutoring. I've got a friend and his wife, they're my age, they've got 4 kids. None of the kids ever went to school. I bet they turned out pretty well. And I'll tell you what, they are the most amazing kids. They are so grounded. They're not all bought into the, I've got to have this brand, I've got to have this pair of shoes. They're just lovely. They are like, they're kind of like Swiss Family Robinson. They are the ideal, I go around there and it's like, wow, it's just lovely to be there and be part of it, And that has only come about because they weren't indoctrinated with the schooling.
Exactly.
Mum and dad are very, mum and dad are awake. I think they were awake years before most people were. And they've done the kids are just leveled. They're practical kids. They can do anything. They're up on all their schoolwork. The youngest one, she's now at agricultural college. She keeps goats. She milks the goats. She's 18 years old, and she's just so practical. It's untrue. She's going to make someone an amazing wife.
Do you think we're actually healthier like 50 years ago?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because people say we're living longer, but I actually think we're not living longer, we're dying longer. Our lives are prolonged, so it looks as though we're living longer, but we're just dying longer. We're being held alive longer.
Yeah.
Right, with all the medicines and all the pharmaceuticals. But I think would it be right to say that we're actually a lot healthier 50 years ago with the food and everything?
I think without any doubt at all. You know, when I was a kid, my parents grew all of the food. You know, the local farmer would send a pig into slaughter, and we would get half a pig twice a year. We'd get half a sheep from another farmer twice a year. The freezer would always have good quality meat in it. You know, we would takeaway was something then what was, wow, we might have that once a month. If we were, really good kids, we might get Chinese once every 12 weeks. Not like now, kids want pizza every night or chicken nuggets or whatever it might be. Processed food has got to stop. Absolute period. It is trash.
Yeah.
It's got no goodness in it. It's not doing the body any good. It's not doing the brain any good. It's all about the fix. It's now, I feel really good. An hour's time I'm hungry or I'm bloated. There's no natural sustainability to it. So I think parents need to start, like you said, with the schooling. Same with the food. We need to start taking the responsibility of this back, and we need to get it back into our hands, totally out of the big corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And just my final question, sorry, because I forgot it before.
Go on.
The protests that are going on and the tractor protests. What do you make of that? I mean, have you been to any of those? And
okay.
There's a flip side where people go, is this not just going to lead to food shortages, which is what they want? Is there like a shadow side to it or not?
I think there always is, unfortunately. Right. So back September last year, there was 4 of us which got together to start the campaign for No Farmers, No Food.
Yeah.
Myself being one of. And we got talking about how that would pan out. More people then got involved. The campaign as No Farmers, No Food was put together. That name originally came from an Indian project, what took part out in India for exactly the same thing, where they were trying to ban nitrogen, and they were arguing about the price of food and so forth.
Yeah.
And obviously lots of unhappy farmers over here, so the campaign took off quite quickly. Within a few weeks, we'd got 50,000 people following on Twitter, and the campaign escalated. Now, at the time, we were trying to suppress the farmers physically taking the tractors out. And I'll be the first one to say that. And I'm someone who's like, grab your pitchfork, we're going for an argument, But it was like, could we deal with this differently to how they are in Europe? Because whilst the tractors are going out in Europe and they're spraying all the buildings with manure and people find it funny, is it actually achieving anything? Well, the answer is not really. And that's the reason I say is because the EU will tell you that they've given the farmers what they want, but the farmers are still out. So the farmers don't believe what they're being told.
What do the farmers want, though? What was the official reason? Like, is it just in
the UK or Europe? So bear this in mind.
Yeah.
So every farm is unique.
Right.
So every challenge on every farm is unique, but they all seem to come down to 3 things. So one was net zero and the implications of the policies, what were put in place around net zero. Let's say growing less food and, growing more pretty flowers, or having wind turbines, or having solar panels, whatever that might look like. 2, the spiraling cost of production of food, because the electricity bills had gone through the roof. So corn couldn't be dried properly, dairies couldn't run properly, glass houses couldn't, be used to the full spectrum over the winter. So spiraling costs of diesel. So we'd gone from 20 pence a litre in the lockdown to £1 a litre now. So fuel's gone up, it's sort of 4 times to its value. So which has pushed cost of food up. And then you look at the big thing, which the biggest argument was no matter if it's a supermarket or a production facilities, farmers getting paid this. I'll give you 2 examples on this. A cauliflower in Sainsbury's, and I use Sainsbury's as an example because I went there the other day and bought one purposely to take to the talk with me, and I asked the lady on the front row to read out the receipt. So the farmer gets paid 28 pence for a cauliflower, and Sainsbury's was selling it at £1.75. So the farmer's getting screwed, the public are getting screwed, and all the money's sitting in the supermarket. Now, bear in mind that billions have been spent on subsidising farmers and the farmers are losing money to produce that cauliflower at 28 pence. So the subsidy is actually ending up in the hands of the supermarket because it isn't being passed on to the public. What was the whole principle of it to start with?
Couldn't they just what's the word?
Mr. Supermarket.
No, couldn't they just stand firm against the supermarkets and just put the prices up? What's stopping them?
They can't. They're all buried in contracts. This is the problem. They're all in contracts. So a lot of these farmers took out 5-year contracts. They took them out prior to the pandemic when fuel was 20 pence.
Right.
And the cost of production was low. So they could produce a cauliflower for 21 pence. Yeah. Sell it at 28 pence. Result. We've got a good result. Here's the problem. When the cost of production goes to 42 pence and you're still getting 28 pence, and every cauliflower you cut loses you 15 to 20 pence. And exactly the same on the milk. So farmers are getting paid, depending on what supermarket it is, but 28 to 32 pence a litre, and the supermarkets sell it at £1.09.
Yeah.
Somewhere, something's wrong. Now, the cost of production on a litre of milk is 42p. So every time a tanker goes up the drive with 10,000 litres on it, you lose £1,000. It goes up the drive 7 days a week. There's nothing you can do about it. You're in a contract.
So these farms, what are they hoping? What do they want? What's a good, middle ground? Like,
I guess
happy medium.
The general public wake up and stop supporting the system is the biggest thing.
No, for the farmers though. I mean, what would satisfy the farmers right now around the world?
I think net zero is a massive issue.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of this. I spoke to the dairy the other day who supply for our wholesale company, supply the milk in.
Yeah.
And the guy said to me, he was talking about net zero and the policies. And he said, so they now as an organisation cannot supply milk to people that are not net zero friendly, that don't have all the appropriate stuff in place. So mini supermarkets, let's say village stores, unless they're now starting to abide by what's required for the net zero, they cannot supply them. The farmers cannot supply the milk into the dairy for processing unless they fit into the structure as well. So the farmer has to fit the structure, the processor has to fit the structure, and the consumer has to fit the structure.
So are they protesting to get rid of the net zero policy, the legislation?
And the things what sit around it. So
and all the other things you mentioned as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to find a more balance in the costing and the pricing and everything else. Yeah.
So pricing's an issue for what they get paid for the produce. The supermarkets are not paying them out properly, or the processors. We need to deal with the net zero issue, and we obviously need to deal with the cost of running the farms and so forth. All of that collectively put together is a massive, massive problem. And that's why farmers are going, sod it, I'll take the 120 grand to get out of farming.
Yeah, the path of least resistance. I can see why they're doing it.
It's not valid anymore to be a farmer. So that's why people are going, I just chuck it away, just get out of it. And until we can change that and make it more valuable to farm, which it used to be in the 70s, it was more valuable to farm. 70s, 80s, 90s, the farmers were well off. Not only because they were getting subsidies, but they were getting subsidies to produce cheap food. The cheap food was driving the economy. Now we've got an economy that can't sustain itself. And I would say later this year, probably September, October time, probably just prior to Donald Trump getting re-elected, we will see an economy crash like you've never seen.
You reckon?
I think September, October, we'll see the currency crash, stock markets crash, everything will come down the end of the year. It's all driving that way.
It's going that way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's tanking, isn't it, at the moment? You can't really see a way out of it. It's just difficult to see. I'm trying to think of positives, but like you said, let's focus on the positives and the solutions.
I think the solutions is that if people stop funding the system, so stop going to the supermarkets. The supermarket is the biggest source of income for the banks. Okay, they're the shareholders. Let's face it. Who's in the back game? It's either going to be BlackRock or I can't think of the name. Vanguard. It's going to be one of those two, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so all that money is within that system. So take the bloody money away from the system.
Yeah. Well, we've got to create that. We've got to create the alternative. We've got to create that network that's easy to use and makes it, like there's no stress, there's no drama, there's no complication. It's quite easy to understand. There's a good website. They know it. If we can do that bit, then people might move across.
I'll just tell you something else, John, before I go.
Yeah.
From my side, when I was running the other farm, we had a polytunnel there. We had us farm shopping, and the farm shop took exactly thereabouts £100 a day. Okay. And we sold 10 vegetable boxes a week to the public. 3 days later, when the pandemic started, we took £15,000 a day in the farm shop and sold 400 boxes a day. Right? And we could adapt for that because of what was available in the wholesale side. Weather was nice. Farmers had plenty of produce. We did really well in that period. Here's the problem. If that happens again, there's no food in the system and there's no food on the farms. If that happens this time, what happened last time and how the world responded to it via changing where they bought produce from will not happen a second time around. If that happened now, we are in trouble. And that's why I say people need to stop giving the money to the supermarket. Go support your farmers. Tell the farmers now what you want them to grow. You know, I've got farmers asking me, what can we grow? I went to see the cucumber farmer today, and he's got an empty greenhouse. And he said to me, what can I put in there that I could sell to you instead of cucumbers? We come to the conclusion his best thing he could grow is either flat beans or long beans, which are like a French bean, but they're massive. And I've got some seed, which I was debating what to do with. And I was like, I could give you that. So he's wanting to get into producing more different lines because he sees this as a big thing. And the beans will put the nitrogen back in the ground, what the cucumbers strip out. So again, starting to look at that mixed, diverse way of farming, even under glass, you know, you've got to put the goodness back in the ground. And that, again, is something that a lot of these smaller producers can easily do. But it needs someone like me going in there and going, oh, listen, is there any chance you could grow A, B, C, and D? I've got lots of the LWA members now that this year are growing food, particularly for the food hubs that are going to.
You've got to do it. You've got to say, look, I'm an ambassador. I've got 50 people all wanting this produce. You go in there, and then that's enough to change his mind and make him produce it, right? So that's
some of these smaller growers are always stuck in the limbo land of if only I had, I've only had another 50 customers. Well, you can get 50 customers easy, but they spend all their time growing produce. Do what you're good at. Grow the produce. Let the organisation with the we're through the PFFA bring the public together, put them on the Open Food Network, and let that system take all the extra you can grow. Grow as much as you want. You're not going to grow too much. There's going to be a requirement for it. Let's get together. Let's decide what we need. Let's get that passion out there into the food industry and take control of it again.